I had rehearsed a lie 100 times in my head, yet the words refused to leave my mouth when I heard the front door unlock. My husband wasn't supposed to be home until the next morning. Every plan I had made collapsed in a heartbeat. Standing in the living room beside a man whose presence had destroyed my marriage, I felt my pulse pounding louder than the footsteps approaching down the hallway. The silence between us became unbearable, and I knew that whatever happened next would change our lives, forever. The man standing beside me was a stranger, but he wasn't who my husband would assume he was either. Daniel had been my closest friend long before I ever met Ethan. For years, he had quietly carried a secret that I never noticed until a week earlier, when he confessed he had been in love with me. I rejected him immediately and told him my marriage wasn't something I would ever throw away. He asked for one last conversation so he could find closure, and against my better judgment, I agreed. Looking back, I realized that single decision had placed all three of us on collision course. Ethan stepped into the room with a tired smile that disappeared the moment his eyes landed on us. His suitcase slipped from his hand and hit the wooden floor with a heavy thud. No one spoke. His gaze moved from Daniel's anxious expression to my pale face, searching for answers neither of us knew how to give. I opened my mouth several times, but every explanation sounded like another excuse. The silence between us grew so heavy that it seemed to steal the air from the room, and I could almost hear my marriage breaking apart. Daniel finally took a slow step forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't what you think." Ethan let out a bitter laugh that held more pain than anger. "People only say that when it's exactly what I think." I wanted to interrupt, but shame over my terrible judgment kept me frozen. I hadn't betrayed my husband physically, yet I had crossed an emotional boundary by allowing this meeting to happen in secret. In that moment, I understood that trust doesn't disappear all at once. It fades through small decisions that seem harmless until they're impossible to explain. Ethan walked toward the kitchen without another word, poured himself a glass of water, and stared out the window into the darkness. I had never seen him so calm, and somehow that frightened me more than if he had shouted. His silence forced me to confront every mistake I had made. I should have told him about Daniel's confession the moment it happened. I should never have agreed to meet him alone. Secrets have a way of growing larger in the dark, and mine had finally stepped into the light. Daniel apologized, saying the meeting had been his idea and that I had already rejected him. He admitted he only wanted to hear the words one last time, so he could move on with his life. Ethan listened without interrupting, but his expression never changed. When Daniel finally left the house, closing the front door behind him, the silence returned. This time it belonged only to my husband and me. I knew the hardest conversation of our marriage was about to begin, and no excuse could erase the damage my choices had already caused. Ethan remained standing by the kitchen window long after Daniel had driven away. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping against the glass like a relentless reminder that storms rarely end the moment they begin. Finally, he turned to face me, his eyes filled with disappointment instead of rage. "I trusted you," he said quietly. Those 4 words cut deeper than any accusation ever could. I realized then that trust isn't only broken by actions, it can also be shattered by secrets. I had hidden the truth, convinced I was protecting my marriage, when in reality I had been weakening its very foundation with tears running down my face. I told Ethan everything from the beginning. I explained Daniel's confession, my immediate rejection, and why I had foolishly agreed to meet him one last time. I admitted that I was afraid Ethan would misunderstand if I told him earlier. Ironically, that fear created the very misunderstanding I had tried to avoid. Ethan listened without interrupting, asking only a few quiet questions. His calmness forced me to be completely honest, because there was nowhere left to hide behind excuses or half-truths. After what felt like hours, Ethan disappeared into our bedroom. My heart sank as I imagined him packing his belongings and leaving forever. Instead, he returned carrying an old photo album from the first years of our marriage. He placed it on the table between us and slowly turned the pages. Every photograph reminded us of promises we had made, dreams we had shared, and battles we had already survived together. Looking at those memories made the present hurt even more, because I suddenly understood how easily years of trust could be endangered by one terrible decision. "I don't believe you cheated on me," Ethan finally admitted, Relief washed over me for only a second before he continued. But I do believe you chose someone else's feelings over honesty with me. His words were painfully accurate. I hadn't been unfaithful in the way he first feared, yet I had failed to protect the openness our marriage depended on. I nodded through my tears, accepting responsibility instead of defending myself. Sometimes love demands accountability before forgiveness can even begin. The weeks that followed were harder than I ever expected. Trust wasn't restored through one apology or one heartfelt conversation. It had to be rebuilt through consistent honesty, patience, and difficult discussions. We attended marriage counseling, set new boundaries, and promised never to keep painful truths from each other again. Some days were encouraging, while others reopened old wounds. Yet every small step forward reminded us that healing is not a single moment. It is a choice made repeatedly, even when the past refuses to stay silent. Months later, Daniel sent one final message. He apologized for placing our marriage in such an impossible position and told us he had accepted a job in another state to begin a new chapter. He wished us peace and asked us never to reply. I deleted the message after showing it to Ethan without hesitation. For the first time in months, there were no secrets between us. That simple act of complete transparency felt far more powerful than any promise I could have spoken aloud. Looking back, I often think about the night Ethan came home early. For years, I believed the greatest danger to a marriage was betrayal itself. I was wrong. The greatest danger was believing that silence could protect the people we love. It never can. Secrets create distance. Assumptions create pain, and honesty, no matter how uncomfortable, is the only bridge strong enough to bring two hearts back together. That unexpected night didn't end our marriage. Instead, it taught us that trust, once broken, can only be restored by truth, humility, and the courage to face each other without hiding anything.